History of Hockey by Penny Hopkins, read by Chris Stafford. Hockey, in its most basic form, dates back to ancient times and to some of the earliest civilizations. As with most sports, its exact origins are unknown, but archaeologists have found 4,000-year-old drawings of men in the Beni Hassan tombs of the Nile Valley in Egypt playing a similar game. Other records have been found in the Aztec, Ethiopian, Persian and Roman civilizations. 3,000 years ago it appeared in the records of the Greek civilization, and at this time appeared to be something like the modern Gaelic sport of hurling. It appeared in the Olympic Games as far back as 2000 BC. But there were also similar games, hitting a ball with a stick, springing up all over. 1,000 years ago, Beku was played in China, and the Noongar people of Western Australia played a game called dumbung with bent sticks and a ball made from the dried sap of the pear tree. The next phase of its development came in the Middle Ages in Europe. By the 13th century, games similar to hockey were appearing all over Europe. In England, they called it kambuka. In Scotland, shinty. In France, it was jeu de main, and the Dutch referred to it as het kolven. In the 16th century, European settlers in Chile describe a game played by the Araucano Indians called chueca. It means the twisted one, due to the bend in the bottom of the stick. The name field hockey first appeared in England in the 14th century. It was one of the many pastimes banned by King Edward III in 1363 when he outlawed all leisure sports from being played by the working class, proclaiming, "Moreover, we ordain that you prohibit under penalty of imprisonment all and sundry from such stone, wood and iron throwing, handball, football or hockey, coursing and cockfighting or other such idle games." Obviously, women would have been able to play even without the proclamation, but you get the idea. We then jump to the 18th century, when hockey reappears in English public schools. It's really here that it develops into the game we now know. As with many sports, it was played by the British Army within the British Empire, expanding the game until the present day. The game, as we know it, currently played by 3 million people in 112 countries, and considered to be one of the top 6 widely played sports. The first professional club was formed in Blackheath, London in 1849. They had some interesting elements to their game, including a version of a rugby scrum and hitting a 7-ounce rubber cube. A few years later, the Teddington Club was founded, where the striking circle was introduced and the cube was changed to a ball. In 1886, the Hockey Association was formed in England and rules were standardised. The modern Olympic Games first saw men's hockey at the London Games in 1908, when only 3 countries took part, England, Ireland and Scotland. It was not adopted as a permanent Olympic sport until 1928, and women's hockey, somewhat shockingly, didn't make an appearance until the 1980 Moscow Games. So what about women's hockey? How did that evolve? Its beginning can be traced to British universities and schools in the 1880s. Sport or exercise for women was becoming more acceptable, and as croquet and tennis led the way, hockey was to follow. The first women's hockey club, Moseley Ladies Hockey Club, was founded in 1887, but it wasn't until 1894 that the first national association was established in Ireland and became the Irish Ladies Hockey Union. By 1927, the International Federation of Women's Hockey Associations, the IFWHA, had been formed, and the sport never looked back. The development of women's field hockey is evident and ubiquitous on every continent and at all levels. Domestic leagues, cups and international tournaments abound, and governance structures are now well established and comprehensive. In Europe, although the International Federation of Women's Hockey Association was formed in 1927, many countries of continental Europe initially did not join. Instead, their women played as sections of the men's associations and were therefore affiliated to the International Hockey Federation. Attempts had been made to standardise rules in 1886, but the first rule book did not appear until 1900, when the International Rules Board was formed in London. Each European country has its own domestic hockey league, which would take too long to go into here, but the development of national sides and their debut in international fixtures provides a guide to the game's expansion. The first international women's match anywhere was between England and Ireland and took place in Dublin in 1896, where the hosts won 2-0. Amongst the other early starters were Belgium, who played their first international in 1924 against France at Lille, and the Netherlands, who played Belgium in Brussels in their first match in 1926. Germany's maiden international was in Cologne in 1930 against Australia, which the home side won 3-2. Spain made their international debut in Berlin against Germany in 1936, losing 11-2. Surprisingly, the first televised women's match was England versus Wales in 1938. It took other European countries a while to get started in the international arena. Italy didn't play its first international until 1974 against Switzerland in Zurich. Poland's first foray into the international game was against Czechoslovakia at Zloty Morace in 1977, where they were comprehensively defeated 12-0. In 1984, the inaugural Euro hockey tournament was held in Barcelona. And on the other side of the Atlantic, hockey has a long history in Canada and was well established in British Columbia by the end of the 19th century. Schools were already starting to play at the turn of the century, with the first recorded being between a girls' team and boys' team in 1903 at Vancouver High School. British Columbia remains the major focus for hockey in Canada, but it also started to flourish in Calgary, Toronto, Halifax and Newfoundland from the early 1900s, and today still has a thriving club structure. On the international scene, Canada made its international debut at a tournament in 1956 and attended its first World Cup in 1978 in Madrid, where they finished fifth. They were runners-up in 1983 and finished third in 1986. Interestingly, though, their neighbours the USA have more women playing hockey than men. In fact, women led the way to establishing the game in North America. The game was actually introduced by an English physical education instructor, Constance Appleby. She brought the game to the US in 1901 while attending a seminar at Harvard University. The first women's teams were formed by US women's colleges, and by the 1920s the sport was widespread. While Appleby coached the first US national team on their tour of England in 1920, the USA did not make an appearance at an FIH-sanctioned tournament until 1983, when they finished sixth in the World Cup in Kuala Lumpur. Argentina is the hockey powerhouse of South America, where the game was introduced by English immigrants at the beginning of the 20th century, and the first women's teams were formed in 1909. A women's hockey competition was instituted as part of the Central American and Caribbean Games in 1986. The winner of this tournament qualifies for the Pan American Games. The women's game made its debut at the Pan American Games in 1987 and was a qualifying tournament for the Olympic Games. The Pan American Cup was first contested in 2001. The winners of this qualifies for the next World Cup. Argentina has an unbeaten record in the Pan Am Cup. In 2003, the Women's South American Championship was established, and Argentina has dominated this tournament too until 2016, when Uruguay took the title, with Chile runners-up, probably because Argentina did not take part. Being the sporting nation that it is, Australia is at the forefront of women's hockey. Its first games were played in 1901, and the first women's club, the Wada Club in Sydney, was formed in 1903. By 1907, there were clubs in New South Wales, South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria, and by 1909, interstate matches were being played. In 1910, the All-Australian Women's Hockey Association was formed. The first interstate championship started in 1946, ending in 1967. Western Australia was the outstanding team during this time, winning all but 5 editions, either on its own or sharing it with another. In 1914, the Hockeyroos played their first international against England, and in 1927, England toured Australia, playing 3 test matches and an interstate tournament. England won every game on the tour. Australia's first overseas tour was to South Africa and Rhodesia in 1930, when they competed in an Empire tournament. They made their Hockey World Championship debut at the 1936 tournament in the United States. In 1959, Australia won its first international tournament at the Holland Tournament and has never really looked back. New Zealand saw its first women's hockey in the 1880s, and the first inter-provincial match was held in 1899. Its initial governing body, the Women's Hockey Association, was formed in 1908. Before the First World War, hockey was the most popular sport for women, but by the 1920s its popularity had waned as netball took over. It was, however, the first team sport played at international level by women. The first game came against an English touring team in 1914, but nowadays it's considered a minority sport in New Zealand. The FIH has 21 African countries as registered members. These stretch from Morocco and Egypt in the north to South Africa and Botswana in the south. Its major tournament is the AFHF African Cup for Nations, which is contested by men and women. It's the main qualifying route for the World Cup and the Olympic Games. South African countries also take part in the World League, Youth Olympic Games and African Club Championships. Access to artificial turf pitches is limited, but this has not stopped South Africa from reaching 13th in the world rankings. There are several initiatives underway, particularly in West Africa, to develop hockey. Ghana has been a major participant in this scheme and as a result is currently Africa's second highest ranking country at 28th. To put this into perspective, Ghana has only 1 artificial turf pitch in the whole country, while in England there are more artificial pitches than there are clubs. There are 30 countries affiliated to the Asian Hockey Federation, although not all of these may have a women's team. The traditional stars of Asian hockey are India. After they won the 2004 Hockey Asia Cup, they earned the nickname Golden Girls of Hockey, a name that has stuck with them ever since. Domestic hockey is widespread in India, and it was only a matter of time before it made its debut on the world stage. Its breakthrough performance came at the 1974 Women's Hockey World Cup, where they finished 4th. Since then, India has finished consistently among the top places in the Asian Games, Hockey Asia Cup and the Afro-Asian Games. Indeed, the women's game became so popular in India that in 2007 a Bollywood film was made about it, Chak De, India, starring Shah Rukh Khan. Although they are usually well up in the world rankings, India has recently been overtaken by other Asian countries. The other 3 are relative latecomers to the game, with all of them first taking part in tournaments in the 1980s or early 1990s. But they have been a part of the general explosion in sport in the Far East over the last 30 years and are reaping the benefits of investment with a string of excellent results. So it's official. Hockey is everywhere, and with the expansion of the game has come a proliferation of tournaments, some continent-wide and others worldwide. For many sports there can be no doubt that the pinnacles to reach are the Olympic Games and the World Cup. In hockey, qualification for the Games or World Cup may depend on a country's performances in their own continental tournaments. Very often, only the event winners will make it to the world stage. In Europe, the trophy to play for is the Euro Hockey Nations Championship. The women's tournament began in 1984 and its inaugural winners and dominant force thereafter were the Netherlands. It started as a 4-yearly event, but since 2007 has switched to biannually. Since its inception, the Netherlands has won it 8 times and twice been runner-up. Germany has won it twice and been runner-up 5 times, and England have won it twice and finished second twice. In the 12 tournaments so far, the winning side has come from just these 3 nations. There are several tournaments that incorporate both North America and South America. The Pan American Cup has been contested since 2001. The number of years between events seems to vary, but to date the winners haven't. Argentina has won each of the 4 events so far, with the 5th edition due to be held in Lancaster, USA in 2017. On each occasion, the USA has been runner-up, but perhaps this will change this year, with America playing host for the first time. The winners of the Pan American Cup qualify for the next World Cup. The North and South American nations also play in the Pan American Games, which are held the year before the Olympic Games, and for hockey are the qualifying tournaments for the Olympics. Although the Games has been taking place since 1951, hockey did not make an appearance, and then only for men, until 1967. Women's hockey debuted 20 years later in 1987, with the first winners being, not surprisingly, Argentina. They won the next 5 titles until in 2011 their winning streak was broken by the USA, who won in Mexico, beating the former champions 4-2 in the final. The USA also took the title in 2015 in Canada, when once again they defeated Argentina, this time 2-1. There have now been 7 South American Women's Championships. Argentina has won all but the last in 2016, which in Argentina's absence was won by Uruguay, with Chile as runners-up. Australia and New Zealand are the outstanding teams in Oceania hockey. Its major tournament is the Oceania Cup, which is held every 2 years. Unfortunately for hockey development in the region, no one but Australia and New Zealand seems to get a look in. Since it began in 1999, the tournament, which is held every 2 years, has been won by Australia 6 times and New Zealand 3, with the other team finishing runners-up on each occasion. In fact, until 2007, there were only the 2 teams at the event. Since then, the number has varied from 2 to 4. The winner receives entry into either the World Cup or Olympic Games, depending on the cycle. With a lack of nearby competitors, Australia and New Zealand have to rely on the World Cup, Olympic Games, World League and Champions Trophy to challenge them, as well as the Commonwealth Games. Australia has taken every Commonwealth gold medal, except one which went to India in 2002. South Africa dominates both gender games at the AFHF Africa Cup for Nations. The women's event began in 1990, with the first won by Zimbabwe. The subsequent 6 tournaments have all been won by South Africa. The winner qualifies for the World Cup or Olympic Games. Asia appears to be awash with tournaments as they compete for the Hockey Asia Cup and the Hockey Asia's Champions Trophy, as well as the Multisport Asian Games. The Cup began for women in 1985. Its first winner was South Korea, and since then there have been 7 more events, with South Korea winning 2, China 2, Japan 2, and India 1. The current top 5 Asian teams take part in the Asia Hockey Champions Trophy. South Korea won the first in 2010 and the second a year later. Japan took the third on home soil in 2013, and the most recent title went to India in 2016. The Asian Games saw the introduction of men's hockey in 1958, but women didn't make their debut until 1982. India won the first title when it was held in New Delhi, but since then South Korea and China have dominated, the former with 4 wins and the latter with 3. And so it appears that the continent-wide contest is thriving, but it's at the global tournaments, the World Cup and the Olympic Games, that we really get to see competition in all its strength and glory. These 2 tournaments are undoubtedly the sport's biggest stages, but in addition, hockey also has a World League and the Champions Trophy. In total, 21 nations have qualified for the Olympic Games since women's hockey was introduced in 1980. Zimbabwe became the first Olympic champion, and at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games, Great Britain won their first gold. In between, there have been 3 wins for the Netherlands, 3 for Australia, 1 for Spain, and 1 for Germany. The 13 Women's World Cups held since 1974 have only seen 4 winners out of 28 nations that have competed at different times. The Netherlands is the outstanding team, having won it 7 times. No one else really comes close. Argentina has 2 wins to their credit, as do Australia and Germany. The International Hockey Federation has tinkered with the format, and in 2018 it will expand once more to 16 teams. Beyond that, they're looking into expanding it yet again, possibly to 24 in 2022. The Champions Trophy began as a men's annual event in 1974, with a women's biennial event beginning in 1987. However, the 2018 tournament in Changzhou, China, will be the last, as the Hockey World League has surpassed it in popularity. Argentina will probably lament its demise, as they have won 7 titles, with the Netherlands and Australia having won 6 each. The only other countries to have registered a win are Germany, China and South Korea. The Hockey World League is a different beast altogether. It runs over 2 years and is the qualifier for both the World Cup and the Olympic Games. There are 4 rounds for each competition, with round 1 organised into regions. The top teams do not have to play this round, but qualify straight away for round 2 or semi-final event, depending on their ranking. There have been no surprises in winners so far, though, with Argentina winning the inaugural World League in 2012-13 and the Netherlands the second in 2014-15. In conclusion, we can see that success comes through investment, as in any sport. The big winners are those who have or can afford to put the resources into the game. It's not necessarily the case that a long history in the sport will guarantee success. It's more a question of commitment. To a degree, the divide will always be between the haves and have-nots, but as often proves to be the case, success breeds success. This is particularly true in women's sport, which will usually only receive funding, investment, sponsorship and coverage if it has already reached a certain level. The Netherlands, Australia, Great Britain and Argentina have built on their history of successes, and now the sport has gained a level of popularity few would have thought possible only a few years ago. Players are now household names, and as with most women's sport, while the dedicated few may turn out to watch club hockey every week, the audience for internationals is much, much wider. We've already seen how hockey has expanded into every corner of the world, and during its history the stick, ball and other equipment has changed dramatically. From sticks to balls, pitches to protective wear, the hockey player today looks very different to even a few decades ago. So let's take a look at how the game has changed for the player and spectator. The equipment, rules and playing area has had an effect on the sport's development, as modern materials have improved the game. It was always a game of a ball with a stick, but as we've already seen, the ball wasn't always round. In 19th century England, it was a 7-ounce rubber cube. It then became a seamed leather ball, similar to that used in cricket, until now, when it is made from hard plastic and thus impervious to water damage from a synthetic water-fed pitch. Over the years there have been many variations of and developments to the stick, but in the rules only 3 parts of it are specified: the head, the handle and the splice. When you research this subject, you can find pages and pages of technical detail as to the length, width, angles of the bend, hook, straight or bowed handles, and even kinked handles, all of which is interesting, if not somewhat complicated. For the purposes of this history, we will just consider the major changes. Traditionally, the stick would have been wooden, made from hickory, ash or mulberry, and although wooden sticks continue to be made today, their popularity has been overtaken by sticks made from fiberglass, aramid fibre and carbon fibre. The length of the head has been the most prone to changing trends. It started long, sometimes in excess of 300 millimetres, but it began to shorten in the 1860s when hockey took off in India. At that time, only one side of the stick could be used, which meant a shorter head made it easier to move the stick around the ball and change the direction of dribble. The tendency to shorten it reached a peak in the mid-1980s, when some heads made for the 1986 World Cup were only 95 millimetres in length. But these changes were thought excessive, and in most cases the stick was considered unusable. The 1980s also saw the introduction of the upturned toe, called the hook, and also the midi and J-shaped heads. But by the end of the decade, the International Hockey Federation had restricted the upturn of toe to 100 millimeters. By the 1990s, bends to the edges of the handle were allowed, and also specialist sticks for goalkeepers were introduced. By the 2000s, composite makeup of sticks became prevalent, and the number of standard head shapes available was 5. By the middle of the decade, the focus had switched to the permitted bow. At first the maximum was 50 millimeters, but in 2006 it was changed to 25 millimeters. In the last few years, rule changes have gone back to the basics of length and weight, as in 2013 the maximum weight allowed was changed to 737 grams. The stick is now usually 89 to 95 centimeters long. The maximum length was changed to 105 centimeters in 2016. Stick evolution was obviously very important to the development of the game, but sports history aficionados would probably cite the move to synthetic pitches as hockey's most significant innovation. Artificial pitches are now mandatory in international tournaments, but they actually didn't make their first appearance until the 1970s. There are currently 3 main types of surfaces used. Unfilled or water-based, which is most popular. It requires regular watering to prevent wear. Dressed or sand-dressed, sand supports the fibres for some of its depths, and filled or sand-filled, longer fibres with support for sand for all of its depths. The water-based surface may encourage a faster game, but it may not be a long-term solution due to the need for water conservation, so we may see more of the alternatives in the future. The new 3G pitches, commonly used in football, have been put forward as an option, but the FIH sees them as too slow and inconsistent to be a viable alternative. The speeding up of the game has also encouraged the development of better safety equipment. All goalkeepers have to wear helmets, and the padding is now much thicker. More padding is worn by all players, and mouthguards are now compulsory in many countries. Artificial pitches are undoubtedly the way forward for hockey, but the move has not been without criticism. As mentioned earlier in this series, there is a great inequality of access to artificial pitches worldwide, especially in Africa. For example, there is only one synthetic pitch in the whole of Ghana. India also has struggled with the change, and most of the players don't get to play on suitable synthetic surfaces until their late teens. So what of the future? The next World Cup will be in London in 2018, and will take place at the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, built for the 2012 Olympics. As the host nation, England will obviously be hoping to build on the buzz created by Team GB's Olympic gold in Rio in 2016. To maintain the momentum over 2 years will be a difficult task. Will the millions who stayed up to watch the gold medal match still be inspired to buy tickets for the World Cup? And if spectators are sometimes fickle, so too can be the media coverage. We can only wonder how broadcast coverage will develop, or how the print and online media will increase its coverage of this popular sport. With 3 of the women's team sport World Cups due to be held in the UK over the next 3 years, the 3 governing bodies in England have got together to introduce Team Up to encourage girls and women into sport. The England and Wales Cricket Board, England Hockey and England Netball have joined forces in a campaign to get 150,000 girls aged 7 to 13 involved. And there's free training and resources for teachers in primary and secondary schools. So, in conclusion, with a number of new initiatives in developing nations, this situation should improve, albeit slowly. While we're encouraging children to pick up a stick, this must be backed up with investment in infrastructure and facilities. When it comes to the progression of women's hockey, the likelihood of it gaining even more popularity is reliant on the same components as most women's sports: media coverage, sponsorship, and resources. Hockey is in a good place right now, but like some other women's sports, it needs to continue expanding both its player and fan base in order to not just build on its history, but maintain its position in women's sport. You can find more narrated versions of our history series, including rugby and netball, at wispsports.com. And Wisp Sports Radio's podcasts are also available on iTunes, where you'll find more conversations from the world of women's sports.